Hello and welcome to the Women in Motorsport program. I'm Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, and with me is Ben Schneider from Grid Live Encore and LastCar.info, as well as Joe Samaniego. As always, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. You too can invest in the Grid Network by clicking on the link in the video description. Or you can always do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chats. Also, a big thank you to Leonardo and Jason for the coffee and super chat during the Rolex 24 pre-race show. Now be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our amazing content throughout the week. Now with that being said, let us take a quick recap of the women in the Rolex 24. Now, there were a record of 9 women in the field at Daytona. Starting in LMP2, we had Lilou Wadou in the number 88 LMP2 Richard Mille AF course, but their race only lasted 107 laps. About 3 hours into the race, the ARCA LMP2 number 7 suffered engine issues and was done early. However, Joe and Ben, we saw the 88 up towards the front fighting in the top 3 of LMP2. So Joe, starting with you, we know that Richard Mille has a long racing record in sports cars. How disappointing was this for the team?
Quite disappointing because at the end of the day, the team, they were going out there hoping to get top 5 podium finish, potentially a win if things go their way. They weren't exactly one of the favorites in LMP2, but a lot of people have a lot of high regards to that team and their accomplishments with what they've done over in Europe. So it's pretty disappointing when 107 laps in the race and you're starting to have issues. You prepared all the time for this race. Of course, it's just the first race of many, but still it has a sting for the team. And then especially all the accomplishments she has been able to do on the track the last couple of years. This was a great opportunity for her, and for her to end so prematurely, it's just a tough break for her. But I anticipate we're going to see a lot more of her throughout the racing year because she is one of those drivers that, whereas Formula car, sports car, she seems to be around and starting to make more of a name of herself as she continues to gain more experience.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the things they were talking about on the pre-race show is how much this race has evolved over the years and how part of the battle used to be just getting your car to the end of the race to finish the full 24 hours. Now that's almost an expectation because of the technology we have and the endurance we have in these race cars. So it's particularly frustrating now when your race ends as early as theirs did here, and you don't get to the finish of this marathon race. I suppose you can take away some positives from the laps you were able to get in and try to build on that data and work that for the rest of your season. But for the biggest race of the year to end like that is certainly a disappointment. But I've got to say I don't have too much to add to what Joe said because I am certainly more of a casual IMSA watcher and viewer. I always watch this race, 24 Hours of Daytona. I always watch Sebring. Always watch Petit Le Mans to end the year. But I do know that this team has a great history in sports car racing, and I'm sure that they can put this behind them and build on that to try to rebound for the rest of the season.
Yes, as you both mentioned, it must have been quite the disappointment for the team and the drivers. But now taking a look at GTD, Ashton Harrison in the number 45 Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Lamborghini Huracan finished 17th in class, 42nd overall out of 59 total cars, and was the last car scored running. Now in 49th place were Catherine Legg, Tatiana Calderon, Sheena Monk, who was in the 66 Gradient Racing Acura NSX GT3. Now, their race was undone because of some electrical issues that they experienced. The team started GTD Pro and had the pace all weekend. They made it to the halfway point before they had to retire the car. So, Ben, starting with you for this one, how do you anticipate the drivers took the weekend performance overall?
Yeah, well, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record based on the answer to the last question here, but I'm sure it's a disappointment to not be able to get to the finish of this race here. Again, you might be able to take some positives from what you learned for the rest of the season. But this is obviously the biggest race of the year, and I know that all of these talented women were certainly hoping to make a name for themselves and make an impact here. Ashton's entry finishing 42nd overall, the last car scored running. Like I said, I know it is certainly more common to see more cars finish these races nowadays, but it is still a marathon. It does still take an entire team effort just to get to the finish, so they can take some pride in that, I suppose, even though they were last of the cars running. not everybody's finished running at the end of the finish of these races, given the demand that it takes not just on the human body, but on the cars and technology themselves. And unfortunately, the number 66 team wasn't able to get much beyond the halfway point because of their electrical trouble. But, Catherine Legge, Tatiana Calderon, Sheena Monk, I know that, they have continued to work hard to get opportunities like this. I know this has to be a disappointment, but based on how the last few seasons have gone for each of them, I have no doubt that we'll continue to see them come back. And I know Catherine in particular was being interviewed on the Peacock Pit Box and was being asked, are you going to try to get back to Indy this year? And she said, we're working on it. There's some limitations with how many engines are available, but hopefully there'll be some opportunities later on this season for them to make it to the finish of one of these races and try to put in some good results for them later this season.
I think overall, while the weekend didn't go exactly as planned for all of them, you have to look back and think of, okay, how is this going to help me for the rest of 2024? When it comes to Catherine Legge, people are talking about her at the Indianapolis 500. We saw that Gradient Racing team really perform well in the beginning phases of the race when the car was running good. Her, Tatiana Calderon, Sheena Monk, I think they have to feel pretty good at the pace, the car, what they were showing they can do. That could be potential for more opportunities for the three of them around sports car racing, or don't, as you mentioned, Catherine Legge, maybe Tatiana Calderon could find a way back into IndyCar, especially on the road courses. She did a partial season with AJ Foyt Racing until the sponsorship dried up. Ashton Harrison, accomplished road racer when it comes to sports car. I think it was just very disappointing set of circumstances that undone her race being that far back. But overall, I think especially for her, I think she's still going to have opportunities throughout 2024 in sports car racing. So she has that set where she knows she's going to have more races. Catherine Legge, Tatiana Calderon, Sheena Monk, while disappointed, I feel like at least they had to feel good that when the car was running good, they were looking good in the car, showing the pace, and hopefully getting some more exposure for opportunities in 2024.
Yes, definitely. And now turning towards the most followed group of drivers, we have the Iron Dames with Sarah Bovey, Michelle Gadding, Rahel Frey, and Dorian Pin. Now they had an eventful race. They got caught up in some on-track incidents, fell back, came to the front, and then back again. So in the end, the sixth place finish for the team was their best finish in IMSA. So Joe, considering how eventful their race went, does still managing to come away with a strong finish give them positive momentum for 2024?
Yes, definitely. And if anything, I feel it builds a little bit of character of we can overcome these challenges. Granted, this is a 24-hour race. A lot of the endurance races, 6 hours. We're going to have a couple 12-hour races here and there. 24 hours is a lot of time for things to go right and a lot of things to go wrong. But when things go wrong, you do have the benefit of a lot of time to make up for it. When we saw the 83 essentially had some issues, got caught up in other people's messes, going off track, that could have easily been a pressure moment where they'll overcome by all the circumstances against him and then fall back. They kept coming towards the front. They were always hovering near 10th place. So for them to get positions towards the end, I think it's really great. For Dorian Pin, especially with all the racing she's done, I feel in IMSA, I'll be interested to hear if Ben has the same opinion as well, too. It seems like when it comes to IMSA, considering it's in America, there's a little more argy-bargy, as they say, a little bit more contact compared to Europe. I think this is just great experience for her, more racing in the United States, and especially we know where she's going next year in F1 Academy, just continuing to build her portfolio of all the series she's raced in. So overall, I think this was a pretty great day. Well, 2 days of racing for this since it was a 24-hour race and just building up that experience and especially racing sports cars in the United States.
Yeah, Joe, and I think, again, like I mentioned, a more casual sports car viewer, but I know that, people have talked about how we're kind of in a golden age right now where we have regulations that allow teams based in the World Endurance Championship like the Iron Dames, the ability for them to come here to IMSA to compete in the race like the Rolex 24 Daytona, I think is a wonderful thing. And, they're not the only ones. Anybody can do that now with the way the regulations are. So for them to come here and, like Isha was mentioning, in her rundown, just to go through all of the circumstances that they were going through and be able to rebound and still come away with a sixth place finish, I think is a very solid result. And Dorian Pinn as well, Joe. I know we're going to talk about her a little bit later on in the show with the F1 Academy update, but I'm very intrigued as to what her future holds. I think she's got a bright future no matter where she ends up, what discipline of racing she ends up in. I'm very excited to see what she can do in F1 Academy, but if she decides sports car racing is her calling, she's certainly proven she's got a career there as well if she wants it. So it's going to be interesting to see what she can do in 24 and beyond.
Definitely, it's a bright future ahead for her. And speaking of F1 Academy, I'll now hand it over to Joe to talk more about it.
Yeah, F1 Academy 2024, there will be the second season of the all-female open wheel series. So far, since we last went on the air, there's been some more drivers. So right now, 8 out of the 15 drivers have been announced, and we have 2 Americans on the grid. Chloe Chambers joined Leah Block, and Chloe will be representing the Haas F1 team, of course, the American-based team. Now, yesterday, the news broke that Haas will continue to be the only American-based team in F1 for another 2 years. But we have 2 female Americans on the F1 Academy. So I have to ask you, starting with you, Isha, as great as it is to see Americans on the F1 Academy grid, still considering there's only 10 teams in F1, is the path to F1 more challenging since there's still only 10 F1 teams? Because that's the goal, is to help them get on the path to F1.
Yes, absolutely, Joe. It's still quite challenging to get into Formula One. I mean, putting aside the topic of Americans, just for any driver from any part of the world to get into Formula One, it's very competitive and challenging. And on top of that, you now have programs like the F1 Academy that allow younger, talented drivers to, hone in on their skills and gain more experience. But the thing is that while that's really good for drivers to gain experience and learn, it's also creating a larger talent pool. Um, and even though we've got all these amazing young talented drivers that may deserve a spot in F1, the number of seats is still stuck at 20. And I think the only solution to that is incorporating more Formula One teams. And if you look at this under the American lens, it's obviously more difficult for American drivers to get into Formula One. So overall, I think the path to F1 is definitely becoming more and more challenging for these young drivers.
I'm going to try not to be too redundant because I just got off of Grid Tonight where we were talking about this for the bulk of the show. But, forget, the female drivers in F1 Academy, forget, if it's an American driver coming in. I mean, it's more difficult for anybody. If you have 20 seats as opposed to 22 or 24, which I believe is, as far as they've said they're willing to go, I think personally they could probably get away with even going to 26 if they had as much interest. And then we start talking about some limitations at some tracks. There's no doubt about that. But the idea that, I think Toto Wolff said something about, we'd have to worry about safety concerns if we let an 11th team in at some of these circuits when we had 11 teams as recently as 2016, I think is absolutely ridiculous. But to answer the question, it's exponentially harder. I mean, it's hard enough to get into the pinnacle of this sport and the few number of seats that are available. If you have an opportunity to open yourselves up, when we hear people within the sport saying, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had an American driver? And I know we finally have one now with Logan Sargent, but Colton Herta wanted to come over here. Andretti's wanted to come over here. If you wanted one badly enough, why would you not give a spot to a team that is as dedicated as Andretti, that is pledging to put one of those drivers in their seat and give them that opportunity through that outlet there? But you've closed it off, and now there's still only 10 teams and 20 cars available. So, I know obviously we're talking about the drivers in F1 Academy right now, and I think, all of them are 3 to 5 years away, at least probably, from having the conversation, are we going to put them in an F1 car? But let's say things do progress that far and they, work their way up to Formula 3 or even Formula 2 and run well enough to earn a super license. There's still no guarantee after they earn a super license that there's going to be a spot open for them on the grid. There'd be no guarantee with 22 spots either, but it would be more likely. There'd be more likely to be an opening. So it's very, very frustrating to get the news that we received today. I know it's going to be Thursday morning by the time people are seeing this, but it's very frustrating for a whole number of reasons, but just basic mathematics. This is another reason why I don't understand why there's such opposition to this. If you want to you want to sit here and make the argument that you can have 2 more spots open on the grid for the talented young drivers coming up through the ranks, why are you so hell-bent on not letting Andretti Global onto the grid in 2025? It makes absolutely no sense.
Makes no sense. And for me, the move that, okay, we're going to have 2 American females on the grid, I'm happy for Chloe Chambers, Leah Block, but it just seems odd that we don't really have much for them guaranteed afterwards. Maybe Formula 2, maybe Formula 3, F1. Well, we just closed the door on ready. It just really sends mixed messages for 2024 and for the grid there. I think it's going to be really interesting. The one thing I found interesting though, United States, they now have the most drivers on the grid as of now with the 8 announced. That of course could change because right now some of the drivers that have been added since our last one in 2023 include Tina Hausmann from Switzerland, Maya Woog from Holland. She's of course part of the Ferrari Academy, Carrie Schreiner from Germany, and Abby Pullen from Great Britain. So 8 drivers, and of course, all of them have been so far named with a F1 team. The 2 F1 teams that have yet to name a driver for F1 Academy, Red Bull and Visa Cash App Red Bull, formerly Toro Rosso. That's going to be something we're going to have to get used to saying. Now,
is it Red Bull or is it Racing Bulls, Joe?
Racing Bulls.
What happened to Racing Bulls?
It's going to be V-Carb. I think it's going to be the way to go with 2024. With that said, there's still 7 drivers from last year that have won a race, and they have not been mentioned as getting a seat yet. Lena Buller, really great season, nothing yet. The Kabasi sisters from United Arabics, nothing yet. And Emily Duhas, Jessica Edgar, and Nira Marti, they all won races last year. They haven't been named for Red Bull or V-Carb yet. So, Ben, how surprising would it be if any of these past winners do not return to F1 Academy in 2024?
I suppose it would be surprising. Now, you could look at it one of both ways here. You could say, well, maybe it's a good thing none of them are returning because that means opportunities have opened up and they're racing elsewhere and they're moving up the ladder. And that's ultimately the goal of F1 Academy. This isn't supposed to be, WF1, if you will, or, the pinnacle for women in Formula car racing. This is supposed to be something that allows them the opportunity to align themselves. In this case, 10 of the seats are going to be fully backed by F1 teams and puts them in an opportunity where they can, have a seat to continue to race and hone their skills. And then maybe after a season or two here, you move up the ladder if your talent has shown that you deserve that opportunity, and we go from there. If that's the case for these race winners that have shown that and have gotten those rides, then I think, you could argue it's a good thing that none of them are coming back to F1 Academy because that means they've earned those opportunities. It's what we lamented about Jamie Chadwick, who I think clearly was ready to move on from the W Series after 2021, but there was really nothing else available for her, so she had to come back and defend her title, and then she just started dominating, winning almost every race that year before the series folded. You could also look at it from the perspective that if they haven't gotten those seats, if they haven't gotten those rides, and they're also not coming back to F1 Academy, well, then we have a much bigger problem on our hands that we need to fully address here, because then the system clearly isn't working. The system hasn't worked for many, many years. That's the whole reason why F1 Academy was born and why the W Series was born before that, to try to give women these opportunities. But if they can't even get an opportunity in this series after winning a race in the series the year before, then that's a larger conversation that we need to address, because that's certainly not ideal.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Ben. I don't have much more to add. I feel like you've said it all, but I think that it definitely is either one of the two things that you mentioned. It's either that they have found better opportunities, which shows how effective the F1 Academy program is, or it shows that, past race winners can't even come back and have spots. So I think that I don't know if it's so surprising to not see them back yet. I think it mostly depends on what they're doing right now and what their future plans are, and if they have opportunities lined up, because that is the whole point of the F1 Academy, to give those opportunities to female drivers. And as we were talking about this in the last question too, connecting it to Formula One, I feel like it's a much bigger problem that we have, and the solutions to it aren't as easy as just creating an academy for female drivers, because the end goal is to be in Formula One. And if you don't have spots in there, then that's the biggest problem you're experiencing. So I think that any of the drivers going through the F1 Academy, that is definitely something that they must be thinking about, including these past race winners. But with that being said, let us now take a look at Toni Breidinger. So, after running full time in 2022 and then scaling back to part time in 2023, Toni Breidinger recently announced that she will return for another full time ARCA season with Venturini Motorsports in 2024. Now, she will be in the 25 Toyota Camry for the 2024 ARCA Menards Series season. Last year, despite not running full-time, Breidinger had some great finishes, including appearances in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Now, sponsors have yet to be announced, but will likely be released in the upcoming weeks. So, Ben, how much did her strong performance in 2023 make this possible for her full-time return?
I think it certainly went a long way. And I know Toni obviously didn't run full time last year in the ARCA Menards Series. She was doing some GR Cup racing with Toyota, and they put her in the Tricon Garage truck for a few starts as well. And she made the most of those opportunities. And, I've got to say, I was very surprised with how well she ran in the Truck Series starts that she got. She broke Haley Deegan's record, actually, for best finish on debut by a female driver. And I think surprised a lot of people because, and we've had this conversation on the show before. If we're just, being honest here, Toni's, ARCA career up until last season was really, looking not so strong in terms of her performance and results, but she really found another gear last year and was able to turn the top tens that she was getting into top fives and even bested it with a third place finish late in the year at Kansas. So she certainly had some strong runs, and I think certainly validated this opportunity that she's been given to come back to the ARCA Menards Series full time. And to be honest, I think that's probably the best case scenario for her. I know that there were some rumors briefly that she might be in the running for a full-time Truck Series seat, and I would certainly like to see her get some Truck Series opportunities in 2024 and beyond. But for a full-time seat now, I think the best thing for her in her career at this point would probably be to do what she's doing, to come back to ARCA full-time on the heels of those strong runs in 23 and try to build on that and maybe try to turn into, as I think we're about to talk about here in a second, a race-winning contender, and then maybe, depending on how this year goes, look at making the jump to a Truck Series in 2025.
Now, Ben, given the strong performances that you just mentioned, I have to ask, do you think a race win is a fair expectation from Toni?
Isha, I want to say yes very badly, and I'm hopeful that she can go out and prove me wrong. I still think there's another gear that needs to be unlocked. And, just for context, I have to point out the third place finish that she had at Kansas late in the year. It was a very high attrition rate, or a high attrition rate in that race, rather. And she did get lapped at the very end. There were only two cars in the lead lap in that race. I think that was the race that Connor Mosack won, if I'm not mistaken, in the OP Gibbs 18 car, if you will. I think that car, is going to be driven by William Sawalich for many of the races this year. I think 14 of the 20. I think it would not surprise me at all if he goes full Max Verstappen and wins, at least 9 or 10 of them. I think he's got a lot of talent. He's obviously got a Cup affiliated car underneath him. That car is just, such a cut above. I think, Venturini is probably one of the only teams that has equipment that's anywhere close to what that team offers. And, Sawalich is a talented driver. So that's not even just a knock on Toni Breidinger. That's a knock on, everybody not named William Sawalich, what they have to compete with. That car alone could probably take half the races. And then, you've got the Rev Racing cars that you got to compete with as well. So as impressive as Toni was last year, and as far as I think she's come, and I wrote an op-ed over at lastcar.info about, we need to talk about this, how much she has improved. I still think there's another gear that we need to see unlocked for Toni Breidinger before I start going so far as to say she can contend for race wins on a weekly basis. And I think if you look at the entire Venturini Motorsports team, generally speaking, because Amber Balkan is going to be back full-time this year in one of their cars, as well as Chris Wright, who has yet to score a single top 5, I believe, in main ARCA Series competition. I know he had that pair of runner-up finishes. I think it was certainly top 3 finishes at Utah in 2020 in the West Series. But in terms of the main ARCA Menards Series, I think he has a lot to prove, as well as Amber Balkan, as well as Toni Breidinger. It's been a long time since Venturini, I believe, ran 3 full-time drivers. They usually do a rotation in most of their cars and then have 1, maybe 2 full-time entries running for the championship. They've got 3 this year, and I think all 3 of those drivers, Toni Breidinger included, have a lot to prove. I'm not going to put a win past Toni Breidinger or Amber Balkan for that matter, but I think let's keep our expectations in check a little bit, at least the first half of the year, and particularly for Amber, who only made a few starts last year, and I think it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to getting back in the ARCA car, and then let's see how she does the second half of the year. So to sum it up, I'd love to see a race win. I'm pulling for both of them. I think that they certainly have the opportunity to get it done with the team that they're with. But I just think that we need to see one more gear unlocked before we start going so far as to make those predictions.
Certainly, Ben. As you said, they definitely do have what it takes to win, but it might take a little bit more time for her to get that win. But anyways, now let us hand it back over to Joe to talk more about Mahindra's AI fail.
Oh, Mahindra. This was something where early January, Mahindra announced their newest influencer was going to take fans behind the scenes at Mahindra and at the track. However, it was an AI generated influence with the name Ava. Now on Grid tonight, Cody, Matt, everybody reported on this, and essentially the big outcry because essentially we're creating a AI person instead of hiring a person, a female person, which we're not giving it to a real person. And because of the outcry, Mahindra did scrap the project and issue a statement. One of the big things, Isha, Ben, I got to ask you, considering the push for more gender inclusiveness in motorsports, equity, and then we had this AI mess from Mahindra come out. How disappointing was it when Mahindra essentially announced they created a female AI character rather than hiring a person? I just still can't believe it.
Yeah, Joe, I'm in the same boat with you. I'm disappointed about this, but more than that, I'm just confused as to why a team would do that. Obviously, I understand that, many more people are using AI technology nowadays, and it's a cooler feature to have within your team. But in the day and age where we're trying to get more women inclusion in motorsports and we're trying to increase women participation, you create a job for an influencer, but then have AI replace that role. It's something that's just really weird and disappointing. And coming back to what an influencer does, the whole point of an influencer is to have a person that other people can relate to on some sort of level, so that they can force you to like a certain team, or in more basic circumstances, an influencer allows you to like a certain product or promote something. So instead of having a human connection between the influencer and, people who would be supporting Mahindra, you have an AI generated person named Ava doing it. I mean, I was disappointed when I saw this, but more than that, I just was really confused as to why this was an idea in the first place. But I know Ben has more to say on this, so I'll bump it over to him now.
I appreciate that, Isha. And actually, Joe, if you don't mind, I'd like to put all three of us up on the screen here because I want to be talking to both of you when I say this as well. Joe, I know that the reasons why are not worth getting into right here, right now, but the reality is this show went away last year for a couple of months, and we, again, reasons aren't worth getting into, but we weren't doing the Women in Motorsports program for pretty much the entire summer. And Joe, when I called you to talk about our strategy going forward for this program and this network and everything, and I wanted to talk about bringing this show back, one of the things that I specifically said was, how can we get Isha involved? How can we get Amanda involved? And Amanda's been on this show as well to talk about her experience at the summit. And the reason that was so important to me as we were talking about how to bring the Women in Motorsports program back to Grid Network was, I think it's important for us to practice what we preach. We talk all the time on this show about how there are so many talented women, not just behind the wheel of a race car, but all throughout all sorts of different roles, whether it's, engineering or, social media, which is obviously, in this day and age, a massive, massive tool that these teams use to promote their brands and everything. I think it's important for us to practice what we preach in the sense that we have talented women here at Grid Network that can be a voice on issues like this. And what better place to give them that voice than a show called Women in Motorsports. So Isha, I'm glad you're on the show tonight. I'm glad you've been on the show since we brought it back. And I completely agree with everything you said. It's not even a gender issue in many respects. I think that there's certainly considerably more outrage that they used a female branded AI influencer in this place here. But, forget gender for just a second. This is taking a spot away from anybody. Any talented influencer or anybody that has, these, talents that they can offer to a race team. Well, now you've put AI in their place and they can't, show you those talents and can't help you through their talents in that way. And I know that, it's not just, influencer. I know that term gets thrown around and, has some negative connotations to it sometimes, but I think AI, is a really fascinating topic that, we could spend a whole show probably debating the repercussions of what it could mean for the future of motorsports as well. But, it's not just influencers that I think could be under threat from teams trying to cut corners here and avoid hiring real people for positions that they think can be filled by artificial intelligence. So it's a concerning trend for me. And I think it was really brought to attention by Mahindra in this decision that they made, and then very quickly backtracked on when they saw how much frustration and outrage there was after the announcement. But I just wanted to make that clear and make our position here clear at this show and this network here, that I think it's very important for us to practice what we preach in that sense and do our part. We lament all the time that, whether it's, sponsorship reasons or, whatever reason that, a talented woman can't get an opportunity in whatever role that they have that they're going for in this sport. It's a very small part that we can offer here at Grid Network to somebody like Isha to be a part of this show. But I think it's important that we do that.
You bring up a really good point, Ben, about especially replacing a human being. Sort of remind me of, remember the old Robo Race idea that came up with Lucas Degrassi, Formula E? That has gone nowhere after that failed start where it just not even went like 2 feet forward. It just went straight into a wall. And I think the fans made it clear they don't want to see the drivers replaced with robots. We know robot drivers are coming, but it doesn't seem like the racetracks where they want them. The outrage of the AI social media influencer, I think that was a good indication that fans don't want to see AI take that position away from a person deserving of it.
Yeah, and Joe, I'm glad you brought Robo Race up, because I think, again, there's a place for that technology. There's a place for testing that technology, and I think what better way to test autonomous cars than trying to have a race between two of them and seeing how they react to that. I think there's certainly a place for that technology, but to try to market it as a series that viewers would tune into and watch and pay attention to and buy merchandise for and support different teams that, as if it's a series comparable to Formula E or Formula One or, NASCAR or IndyCar or whatever. I think that was a mistake on Robo Race's part, was trying to create it in that sense rather than just trying to take the technology and test it and see what the results are from there. And, like you mentioned, Joe, as far as I know, Robo Race has kind of, gone under. I haven't heard anything about them in years. I actually went to the inaugural Formula E race in New York City in 2017. They had a Robo Race car on display, and I know that they were trying to push that technology. I think they've kind of moved on from that endeavor, and it's been a while since I heard anything about it.
It's been a while, and definitely it just seems like, I think it was, again, funding and just that first crash. I think it just made it go from something very exciting to almost a joke. Now, a lot of people have been joking about AI and the Mahindra mess, but we got to be honest, we are seeing an increase in AI technology, from writing papers, generating pictures at the workplace. They're taking over tasks. And it's only a matter of time until AI is going to find its way in motorsports, if it hasn't already, behind the scenes, and like figuring out strategy and numbers. But I got to ask you, Ben, did Mahindra cross the line that the line is set essentially now that for AI influencers like Ava, they're not welcome? We prefer a real person.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not in this regard. I think, you'd have to, any team that wants to try this after seeing the backlash that Mahindra had to deal with, I think that if they were even thinking about having the conversations about putting this in development, and then seeing what Mahindra had to go through, and I think deservedly so in many respects, I think that they would have absolutely, scrapped any even consideration of this idea. So, again, who knows where we'll be 10, 20, 30 years down the line, where technology will be, and what opportunities there will be for artificial intelligence, or for, human beings behind the development of artificial intelligence, or whatever the case may be. I think trying to have one pose as an influencer when that job can be done very well and perfectly by a human, I think is certainly a line that, as was proven by the reaction, you're not going to make too many people happy by crossing that. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I agree with Ben here. I think that in motorsports, at least, it's going to be quite a long time until we see AI in motorsports for any aspect of it. But one of the biggest examples that comes to my mind, I know that this isn't exactly AI, but it's growing up, going to a grocery store, you'd only always have cashiers, and then slowly I started to see the self-checkout part of each grocery store getting bigger and bigger, and that bothered me because not only was it putting people out of work, but I felt like it was reducing that human to human interaction. And motorsports is a place where that interaction is really important between drivers and teams and just fans. So AI influence in that sort of a setting, I don't think makes a lot of sense. But as we know, the whole world is turning more towards AI and technology. So as you mentioned, Joe, it is only a matter of time until we see AI back into motorsports. But I think that at least for now, we are hopefully safe.
Hopefully safe for now. Now, since Ava, the AI character, was removed, Mahindra, we have not seen any new influencer introduced to everybody. And everything seems like before on their social media account. Nothing very different, nothing groundbreaking like they were saying was going to be somebody taking you behind the scenes. So I got to ask, does it seem odd and a bit out of touch that for Mahindra, after they said, okay, we're scrapping the AI character, wasn't a good move, that they haven't looked into hiring somebody to go behind the scenes, provide this content? Because, my opinion, I feel that would be a big PR win if they did say, hey, we're hiring this person and they're going to take you behind the scenes.
Well, I don't know that I consider it a PR win. I think it would be you would try to be saving the situation from a PR perspective here. It would be hard for me to see how they could convert this into a win based on the amount of backlash that they had to deal with when it was first announced. But, yeah, I think, from a PR perspective, certainly you would have to at least go down that. I mean, that's the bare minimum you can do at this point. You've frustrated people that you've gone down the path of, quote unquote, hiring an influencer who's generated by artificial intelligence. And in the words of our own Matt White on Grid Tonight, when they talked about the story a few weeks ago, is not real. The least you could do, in my opinion, is actually make that a real position and give it to a real human being. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer to me. Again, I don't know that I'd go so far as to say you've turned a PR nightmare into a PR win by doing that, but I think that would at least go a certain way in terms of, trying to recover some of the people that you've alienated and at least say, we've heard you, we understand what you are saying here in terms of, why what we did was wrong. And now we're trying to make up for that by actually making this a real position and giving somebody the opportunity to fulfill it. I think that would go a long way in trying to restore Mahindra's trust with the general public here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I I'm really wondering what Mahindra's doing over there because the first thing any team would have done would be to hire a real person to fill that spot. Like that would have been a decision done right away. Like today you hear about the news that they got rid of Ava and then tomorrow they'd have somebody actually filling in that spot and trying to correct their mistake. But here they are just creating a problem and then trying to get rid of it but not actually coming up with a solution. So I'm really this whole situation has really got me confused, and I'm wondering why it happened in the first place and why they haven't come up with a proper solution for it yet or try to fix it. But overall, I think that it's really weird, and I think that it really goes to show how um, AI is not to be integrated into motorsports right now. I don't think motorsports or the fans at least are ready for it.
Yeah, I don't think the fans are ready from AI behind the scenes, what the team does with press releases and all that. I think a lot of fans don't really care about, but they want to see content, drivers, pit crews. I don't think robotic pit crews will be a draw at all. So I think, like you said, it's so many human dynamics in motorsports, and I think that's just one of the things that makes motorsports so special. And of course, the only machines really should be just the race cars or motorcycles, not AI influencers giving you a virtual tour. With that said, we want to thank everyone for tuning in to today's program. And a big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew. You can invest in us, get your name in gold. We'll read your name at the beginning, ending of each program. And if you do, buy me a coffee or super chat. We'll add your name. We'll thank you on the air as well for the coffee or the super chat. If you're not watching us live, you'll see the YouTube thanks button. You can hit that and do a one-time investment. And the easiest way to support us, subscribe, hit that bell icon. We got a good race weekend up ahead with the NASCAR Busch Clash at the Coliseum. It's going to be meaning another Grid Live pre-race show on Saturday, noon Eastern, and then we're going to wrap it all up again and then get our countdown going because we have 1 week of no racing, But then it starts with the Daytona 500 and our special Daytona 500 pre-race show, the NASCAR Cup Series, Formula One, IndyCar, and before you know it, the grid ranking, and we're up to full speed for 2024. For Isha Azim and Ben Schneider, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races.